The 90s, a time when cartoons were wild, outrageous, and sometimes downright cringeworthy. From the strange animation styles to the over-the-top storylines, these shows shaped our childhoods in ways we can't forget. But not all of them age like fine wine. Some of them, well, let's just say they're more embarrassing than nostalgic. So buckle up as we take a trip down memory lane and revisit the top 6 most cringeworthy cartoons of the 90s. Get ready for a roller coaster of laughs, face palms, and plenty of awkward moments. Let's dive in. Based on the hit 1994 movie starring Jim Carrey, The Mask, the animated series brought the wild and zany world of Stanley Ipkiss and his green cartoonish alter ego to the small screen. Airing from 1995 to 1997, the show tried to capture the over-the-top slapstick humor and chaotic energy of the film, but often to a cringeworthy degree. While Jim Carrey's manic performance in the movie was a perfect fit for the role of the Mask, the animated series took things to an entirely different level, and not always in a good way. The Mask, with his exaggerated cartoonish antics, wreaked havoc on the city, but the plot lines and humor quickly became repetitive, relying on the same gags and outrageous situations week after week. The animation style was exaggerated, with characters often stretched and squashed in a way that made the show feel like a lesser version of the iconic Looney Tunes. What made the series even more cringeworthy was the decision to introduce a slew of new, sometimes awkward characters, including the Mask's love interest, who felt more like a plot device than a developed character. While there's a certain nostalgic charm in watching this wild ride of a show, it doesn't quite stand the test of time, leaving us laughing at just how outlandish and frankly absurd it all seemed. When we think of the 90s, one of the most iconic characters that comes to mind is Sonic the Hedgehog. But The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, which aired from 1993 to 1996, is often considered a bit cringeworthy with its zany, over-the-top humor and chaotic animation style. It's hard to watch without cringing at some of the absurd moments. Sonic, the blue blur, is meant to be cool and fast, but the show's slapstick comedy and exaggerated plots often left fans feeling more confused than entertained. The villain, Dr. Robotnik, was a bizarre and almost cartoonish antagonist who often found himself tangled in wacky, convoluted schemes that didn't always make sense. While it was a hit with younger audiences who loved the over-the-top antics, older fans couldn't help but wonder how the legendary video game character ended up in such a wild, goofy series. Despite the chaos, there's a strange charm to it that still resonates in our nostalgic hearts. But let's be honest, it didn't age well and stands as a reminder of how not every animated series can remain timeless. Hey, are you enjoying this trip down memory lane? Then what are you waiting for? If you haven't subscribed yet, now's your chance. Remember, the 90s nostalgia doesn't stop here. Subscribe now and don't miss out on any of this amazing journey of memories and fun. Because if you grew up in the 90s, you know these memories shouldn't be forgotten. They deserve to be celebrated. And for that, you need to be part of everything we're bringing. Let's relive everything that made that decade unforgettable. Hit that subscribe button and join this journey. The 90s saw the revival of the classic Looney Tunes characters in Merry Melody starring Bugs Bunny and Friends, a series that aired from 1990 to 1992. While it featured the iconic characters like Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and Porky Pig, this version felt a bit off compared to their earlier golden age of cartoons. What was once fast-paced, witty, and sharp now seemed to drag with slow jokes, awkward timing, and moments that felt forced. The animation was updated, but it lacked the fluidity and charm of the original shorts. The humor, once cutting edge, now felt outdated, relying on recycled gags and tired slapstick that no longer hit the mark. Some of the newer additions to the series, such as the way they tried to modernize the characters, felt cringeworthy, particularly when they inserted contemporary references or tried to force in pop culture jokes. It was as if the creators were trying too hard to keep up with the times, resulting in a product that felt more like a parody of the Looney Tunes than a true continuation of their legacy. While the nostalgic factor was there, watching Merry Melodies today can leave you cringing at how out of touch it was with what made the original Looney Tunes so timeless. It's a show that tries to recapture magic, but ends up feeling awkward and outdated instead. Street Sharks. The 90s had its fair share of bizarre and wild concepts, but few were as strange as this. Airing in 1994, Street Sharks introduced a group of genetically engineered humanoid sharks that fought crime in a world that seemed to embrace everything edgy and over the top. The premise alone is a bit much. Shark-human hybrids with the ability to transform into fierce street-fighting warriors. The animation style was cartoonish, and the characters themselves felt like they were designed more to sell toys than to deliver solid storytelling. The show was loaded with over-the-top action, silly one-liners, and very little in the way of plot development. While the concept might have sounded cool at the time, who doesn't love a good mutant hero? Watching it today just feels awkward. The cool factor doesn't hold up, and the whole thing has aged like expired milk. But we can't help but look back on it with a strange fondness, remembering how it captured our attention back in the day, even if it didn't quite stand the test of time. Dungeons & Dragons, known as Caverna do Dragão in Brazil, was a beloved animated series that aired from 1983 to 1985, but its impact on the 90s generation was undeniable, as many grew up watching reruns. The show followed a group of kids who were transported into a magical world after riding a theme park ride. They received magical items and were led by a mysterious figure known as Dungeon Master, all while trying to find their way back home. While the show had a compelling fantasy premise, it also had some pretty cringeworthy moments that make it stand out when reflecting on the 90s. For one, the series had no real resolution. After 3 seasons, the kids were still stuck in the Dungeons & Dragons world, with no clear path to their return. The characters, though diverse, often seemed a little too one-dimensional, relying on stereotypical traits like the brave leader, the wimpy sidekick, and the tough girl. The animation itself was on the simpler side, with a color palette that looked a bit dated even for its time. While the show did have its share of memorable moments, its pacing was slow, and the episodes sometimes dragged on with overly repetitive storylines. That said, Caverna do Dragão has earned a nostalgic place in the hearts of many, despite its flaws. For many fans, it was their first introduction to the fantasy genre, making it a key part of childhood memories, even if the show didn't quite hold up when watched in retrospect. The 90s were a breeding ground for oddball ideas, and Biker Mice from Mars, which aired from 1993 to 1996, is a prime example of this. The show followed 3 anthropomorphic mice, Throttle, Moto, and Vinny, who were not only part of a biker gang, but also the Defenders of Mars. The premise alone was wild enough. Mice riding motorcycles in a futuristic, interplanetary setting, battling an evil alien empire led by the villainous Lawrence Limburger. With their rad bikes, leather jackets, and attitude, the biker mice were the epitome of 90s cool, but when you really think about it, the whole concept feels a bit absurd. The animation was your typical 90s fare, featuring bright colors, exaggerated action scenes, and a pretty heavy reliance on one-liners that tried to capture the essence of rebellious youth. While it had a decent following during its original run, watching it today feels like a bizarre time capsule of an era that was all about pushing the envelope in the most outrageous way possible. The mix of gritty biker culture and space-age sci-fi was fun, but it also came across as trying a little too hard to be edgy. Still, for those who grew up with it, there's a certain charm to the show, even if it doesn't quite hold up in the present day. The motorcycles, the characters, and the over-the-top action will always live on in the nostalgia of the 90s, even if the show itself hasn't exactly aged like fine wine. The New Adventures of Captain Planet, which aired in 1993, was a reimagining of the classic environmental superhero show Captain Planet and the Planeteers. While the original series from the early 90s was considered a bit preachy, it still held a sense of charm with its environmental themes and the heroic deeds of the planet-saving captain. However, the new version that followed soon after felt a bit more awkward and over the top. The show tried to maintain its environmental message, but the heavy-handed moralizing and overly serious tone made it difficult to take seriously. The animation was much slicker, but it felt out of place with the more intense, almost cool approach it took in an attempt to appeal to a younger audience. Gone were the cheesy catchphrases, a more colorful approach. In came darker, more dramatic storylines and attempts at edgier humor. While the show still featured its iconic hero, Captain Planet, the formula of saving the planet became repetitive, and watching it felt more like a chore than an entertaining adventure, despite the admirable intentions of spreading environmental awareness. The show ended up feeling stiff and forced, struggling to maintain the magic of its original incarnation. Watching it today, it's hard not to cringe at the overcomplicated plots and awkward attempts to appeal to the 90s youth culture, especially when the eco-friendly message seemed like the show's only defining trait. The Tick was a unique show that aired in the mid-90s, starting in 1994, and quickly became a cult favorite. The show was based on a comic book character, the Tick, a bizarre, over-the-top superhero who was as clueless as he was indestructible. At first glance, the show seemed like a parody of the entire superhero genre, with its bizarre humor and exaggerated characters. The Tick, with his huge blue costume and a love for nonsensical catchphrases like "spoon," was a strange and absurd contrast to the more serious, brooding superheroes of the time. While the humor was intentionally quirky, it often came off as a bit too random, leaving many viewers scratching their heads more than laughing. The animation style was also a bit unconventional, with bold, angular lines and characters that didn't always match the tone of the jokes. Though the show had moments of charm and developed a loyal fan base, watching it today can feel a little cringy, as the humor doesn't always land. The slapstick, surreal humor might have been a breath of fresh air at the time, but in hindsight, it often feels disjointed and forced, lacking the cleverness that would have made it a true standout. Yet despite its flaws, The Tick remains a part of 90s nostalgia, remembered fondly by those who appreciated its eccentric brand of humor. Did you enjoy reliving those moments from the 90s? The nostalgia of that era is more alive than ever, and I'm sure you've got some amazing stories and memories from that time that shaped so many generations. If you love revisiting the best of the 90s as much as we do, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Tell us, what was your favorite product from that era? Or what 90s memory still makes you smile today? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any content packed with nostalgia. Let's keep these memories alive. See you in the next video, where we'll continue to travel through time and rescue everything that made the 90s so special.